There's a moment that doesn't look like anything from the outside. A pause. A slight drop in the room. Nothing dramatic. Just a sense that something has shifted even though no one has moved. You might feel it as a tightening in your chest, or a pressure behind the eyes, or a strange quiet where there was sound a second ago. Not silence, more like the air has been thinned, people keep talking, they laugh, they finish their sentences. Everything continues as planned, and yet something feels off. It's uncomfortable in a way that's hard to explain. Not fear, not sadness, just wrongness without a name. You try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're overthinking, that nothing actually happened, that you're reading into things again. But the feeling doesn't leave. It settles. It waits. This is usually the point where you start pulling back a little, not visibly, just internally, like you're stepping half an inch away from something you can't see. No one notices. They rarely do. That's part of what makes it so isolating. Later, sometimes much later, something becomes obvious to everyone else. A conflict, a breakup, a betrayal, a collapse that looks sudden from the outside, and you remember that earlier moment, that subtle drop, that quiet internal signal, the one you felt before there was evidence. But that's not the part most people notice. Most people think this sensitivity is about picking up on emotions, reading faces, hearing tone, sensing moods. That's the visible layer, the part that can be explained. There's something quieter happening underneath, something that doesn't come from what people are expressing, but from what they're holding back. You don't notice it when someone is loud. You notice it when something should be there and isn't. When a response arrives half a beat late. When warmth is replaced by politeness. It's subtle enough to dismiss, and precise enough to haunt you. You might feel tired around certain people without knowing why, not drained by conversation, just heavier afterward. As if you were carrying something that wasn't yours, you replay interactions in your mind, not because you're searching for reassurance, but because you're trying to locate the exact moment where the feeling changed. It's never the obvious moment. It's always earlier, a pause before a reply, a smile that didn't reach all the way, a question that wasn't asked. That's where it starts to change. At first, you think the discomfort means you did something wrong, that you missed a cue, that you spoke too much or not enough. So you adjust, you soften, you give more space, you listen harder. And still the signal remains. It doesn't ask for action, doesn't demand attention. It just exists. Steady, persistent. This is usually when people around you say everything is fine, and they mean it as far as they know. You nod, you go along with it. You tell yourself you'll stop paying attention to that internal flinch, but something in you doesn't let it go. There's a reason for that. And it isn't because you're fragile or anxious or imagining problems where none exist. But that realization doesn't come yet. For a long time, all you know is that you notice things early, before language, before proof, before permission. You notice when closeness starts to thin, when someone is still present but no longer fully there, when attention shifts away even as words stay kind. This awareness isn't loud. It doesn't interrupt. It whispers. And whispers are easy to doubt. You might even wish you didn't notice it. Life would be simpler that way, cleaner, less complicated. But even when you try to shut it down, it finds another way in, through your body, through fatigue, through that quiet urge to step back. People sometimes call this intuition or sensitivity or emotional intelligence. Those words point in the right direction, but they miss the core of it. Because what you're noticing isn't emotion itself, it's direction. A subtle internal turning. Shift in where someone's attention, care, or honesty is moving. Not a wee yet, just slightly off-center. Most people only register this once it becomes external, when tone changes, when behavior shifts, when distance is undeniable. You feel it before that, in the space between intention and action. This is where the fatigue comes from, not from feeling too much, but from holding awareness without confirmation. Living in that in-between is heavy. You sense the fracture before it breaks, the cooling before the silence, the withdrawal before the explanation. And because nothing has technically happened, you carry it alone. That's not the part most people understand. They see the aftermath and assume you're reacting late, overly affected. too sensitive to what's already obvious. They don't see how early it began for you, how long you lived with the knowing before there was language for it. Around the halfway point of this awareness, something quietly shifts. You stop trying to explain it away. Not because you had answers, but because the pattern has repeated enough times, the signal has been consistent, and slowly, almost reluctantly, you recognize what it actually is. It isn't a warning about danger. It isn't a prediction of loss. It's not fear. It's recognition of misalignment. A moment when someone disconnects internally before they do so externally. When their words remain present, but their emotional investment begins to move elsewhere. You're not sensing what they feel. You're sensing what they're no longer willing to feel. That's the emotional signal. It shows up as absence before absence has a name. Most people are attuned to what's expressed. You're attuned to what's withdrawn. That difference changes everything. It explains why you often feel lonely in company, why certain rooms feel hollow, even when they're full, why some relationships feel heavy long before they fall apart. You're not responding to behavior, you're responding to internal retreat, and because retreat is quiet, it's rarely acknowledged. Once this realization settles, there's no rush that follows, no relief, just a steady clarity. You understand now why distance sometimes feels safer, not because you don't value connection, but because you feel disconnection forming before it's admitted. Space protects you from carrying what hasn't been spoken. You also understand why reassurance doesn't always help. Words arrive after the shift. They don't erase it. This awareness doesn't make you superior, doesn't make you broken. It simply places you closer to the emotional fault lines most people don't notice until they crack. There's a quiet grief in that. Not dramatic, just present. Because noticing early means mourning privately. Adjusting internally while others are still comfortable. You learn to hold back parts of yourself, not out of fear, but out of accuracy. You give less where less is being held, even if no one has said so yet. Toward the end of this understanding, something softens. You stop arguing with the signal. You stop demanding proof. You let it exist without forcing it to explain itself. The room still drops sometimes. The pause still comes. The subtle shift still registers, but now it doesn't confuse you. It simply tells you where you are. And where others are, emotionally, there's no resolution in that. Just orientation. A quiet knowing that you've been listening to something real all along.